Hey everybody, I'm Raul Gonzalez.
And I'm Oscar Ibieta.
And this is Medicare Agent IQ. I can't
That's
remember.
us.
I was trying to remember the name. Yeah.
We are Medicare Agent IQ.
I say it every week. I don't know. I'm going to say anyway. So today we're going to be talking about overcoming fears. Conversation we were having with one of our listeners the other day, but then another listener reached out on YouTube, was like, man, this is really, really good for me. They're like, it hit home. So I was like, you know what? That's what we're going to talk about.
It seems to be
today.
a common denominator, right? A constant, whether and some people are willing to talk about it and others aren't. But I think it's something that is a hot topic, if you will. So that's the reason we decided to go with this for today.
Yeah, I think about people who a lot of time are, they're not working because of the fear and they don't even know it. Yeah. And so I know I used to be one of those people. And so it's easy for me to address, right? When I'm one of them. So kind of take you back to whenever 2008, back when you were finishing high school and I was working at Humana. We started having to sell other products. They wanted us to sell, like hospital plans and things like that. And what they wanted us to do was to go, not hospital, like cancer insurance, all these other things. They wanted us to go door to door to businesses. And I didn't realize that I was afraid to do that. What I thought, I was like, oh, well, before I go, need to clean up my desk and get these papers situated the right way, get my pens out here. But the reality, what I was doing was I was acting on fear. And instead of getting out there and doing it, I was kind of, I was allowing myself to get distracted. And so what we're going to talk about today is helping you to overcome that.
Yeah, when I first got into the insurance industry, I didn't do Medicare immediately. I did. I actually got recruited by an AFLAC recruiter. So everyone knows that's the supplemental products. Your cancer, your hospital, everything that you were just talking about. And so the way that we had to do things was very much like you just said. We had to go door to door. We were knocking on doors of businesses and talking about adding value to their business and adding these supplemental products to their employees. And so, gosh, it was like, I guess this is insurance. That's all I knew. I didn't know anything about it. And I was like, well, I guess this is what I'm doing. And so I didn't like it. Right. There was nothing fun about it, but I'll tell you what, I don't regret it because it helped me over it. I learned a lot through the process and it helped me kind of overcome a lot of fears that I was dealing with. I think it just made me a little bit more well-equipped when I transitioned into Medicare. Wasn't long, just 3 months before I decided, okay, I'm going to transition into Medicare. I like the idea of renewals.
Right.
And so I moved into this business here.
Yeah. But it's honestly, it's a great way to cut your teeth, right? Like it's an opportunity for you to go out there. And to be honest, it's hard to go out. So where would we have our fear since if you work in Medicare for the most part, unless you just focus on Medicare supplements, you're probably not doing a lot of cold calling and just knocking on people's doors. So for me, what I'm thinking about is going out and creating relationships with doctors' offices, going out and trying to create a new relationship with a senior center that allows you in there, things like that.
Do events and stuff like that. Yeah.
Right. So those are the things, or calling your leads. Let's say you do have a bunch of leads and instead you're finding reasons to not do that, or they just kind of, one of the things also, and again, I'm just kind of being transparent here, that I was in that situation at times when I was younger, is I would get these leads and be like, okay, I'll call them tomorrow. And then I'll just figure out something else to do. And then they get colder and colder. And the reality I was afraid. Yeah. Or I just had like a fear of rejection. I at the time I didn't like hearing the word no, and it was a big deal to me. So hey, real quick side note: if you're young and you're single, got to change your relationship with the word no, right? So that's a part of it. That's part of life. So anyway, we're gonna go over now 7 steps that you can take toward overcoming that fear of rejection. And so number 1 is knowledge is power. The big part, right, I think people can get to is they are afraid that, what if I do get someone on the phone who's interested? What am I going to do, right?
I don't have all the answers. I don't know all the information. Well, here's the reality. you're not always going to have all the answers, and you're not going to know everything. So I feel like there's also a fine line somewhere in between there, because you can learn so much where you have enough confidence to get out there and get in front of people. But other times, sometimes people can be paralyzed by that because they don't want to get out there and start getting in front of people, because they say, well, I'm not ready. I'm not prepared. I don't have all the knowledge. I think you have to find that medium in there. But the reality is you do have to have some knowledge so that you can have the confidence to get out there and start having these conversations with people.
Where do you get that knowledge, Oscar?
You read,
Right.
you ask, and the beautiful thing is we have the power, we have the tools in our hands. We have phones. When I first got into Medicare 10 and a half years ago, it was very different. Yes, we had the internet for those young listeners who are tuning in, but it wasn't as accessible, all of this information, and I feel like it is now. But you can, even YouTube videos, there's stuff on YouTube. You can get lost for days when you're browsing. You can read the evidence of coverage for particular plans. You've got to study, the plans that are available in your market and know them, so that when you're out there having conversations with people, you know how to position yourself with them.
One of our listeners reached out to me, and they were saying that even on TikTok, all they did is they said that they were stressed because they didn't know enough about Medicare. And so they went onto TikTok and started looking for it there. So obviously there's places where you can get that information. That probably wouldn't be the first place I go, but there's a lot of obviously you ran into us there, mm-hmm. right? But I'm kind of thinking maybe longer form, right? So YouTube is a great place to do that. But then also just reviewing the evidence of coverage for the plans, going over and reviewing the summaries of benefits, and nowadays we all have these tools, right? Like our agency, we use kind of Sunfire, where we can compare plan to plan. And so that's the thing you can start doing is figuring out how the plans work, and then which ones compete with each other and how they compete with each other, right? So kind of thinking where if you run into someone and they have, I'm just say United, then where the plans well enough where you could say, oh yeah, hey, did you know that there's another plan that has a little bit more dental or a little more, and I always go back to dental, but there's a lot more in benefit than that. You just, basically what you do is you look for the weakness in one plan and where another plan is stronger. And that's you've kind of got it lined up in your hopper, right? Just ready. When someone says, I've got this plan, my backup is this. I kind of do that with Aetna and Humana PPOs in our market. Yeah. Like they compete very well. They have very similar networks. How do I know that? I've put in the research and kind of gotten to know that. Any other thoughts on that before?
No, that's exactly it. You've got to, so when we talk about having the knowledge for these plans, we're not saying have these memorized top to bottom every single line, but to your point, know the strengths and know the weaknesses with each plan, so that way when you're talking to people, you know exactly what those strengths and weaknesses are. You use the PPO example. You can find that similarity with an HMO, right? We know here in this market, United Healthcare and Humana are very competitive when it comes to HMO. So if you meet somebody who's on Humana, you can position yourself and have a conversation about United Healthcare or vice versa, because there's so many, depending on the market that you're working, there's a lot of options out there. And so we're not telling you need to know all those benefits. Just know the strengths and weaknesses of those main products that are out there.
Soapbox alert. I've got a soapbox here. So you're a sports fan?
Yep.
Okay. So I'm a sports fan, and I know a lot about statistics of, I'm a big Spurs fan. We're in San Antonio, by the way, and so I'm big into the Spurs. I know statistics. I know when they won, their last championship, who was playing, different positions. I knew their backup. I knew their bench players. I knew a lot about it. And it was something, how come I know so much? Because I'm so interested. We have one of our employees who's really kind of a fan of makeup and stuff. And so she knows so much about different makeups. She follows YouTube channels about it and everything like that. What if we put that same kind of energy into what we do, into your business, right? How much better would we do if we put that same kind of effort and energy into learning about what we do as we do into sports or whatever else interests us, right? So any hobbies. So anyway, that soapbox is over. But yeah, that's
shorter than I anticipated.
We're already 10 minutes in. So the next one, number 2, is practice makes perfect. What kind of practice would you be doing as an agent that maybe you have a fear? What would you do?
Summary of benefits presentation. I feel like that's one of those things that's a little bit tricky, because when you're in a training room or you're seeing somebody present the summary of benefits, you look at it and you're like, that's pretty easy. I can do that, until it's your turn to be in the driver's seat. And if you don't have that experience, if you're not comfortable with making a summary of benefits presentation, it can be very, very challenging. And so what I did when I first started, in the business was I had my sister sit across the table from me and say, look, you're a 65-year-old and you're getting onto this insurance plan, and I want you to ask me any and every question that you have as I go through and present the summary of benefits. Okay, next. Dad, you're up. Have a seat. Mom, you're up. Have a seat. And I did this with my family. I don't know that I did it with any friends, but get some friends to sit with you, and you have to be able to practice and have them challenge you and have them ask you those questions, because the reality is, when you're in the home and you're talking to your seniors, they're probably going to be asking you the same questions. What do you mean inpatient hospital stay? What does outpatient mean? What exactly do you mean when we talk about, it covers, preventive care? Can you tell me a little bit more about that? So practice it. Get in front of friends, family. You got to have the practice.
Yeah, another one that I'm thinking about with the practicing is kind of role playing, calling your leads. And so what I might do is put together a list of maybe 9 things that people have said when you've called, and then you give them to same thing to mom, sister, cousin, friend, and say, hey, look, I'm gonna run through these. I'm going to call you, and just, these are a couple things that I would want you to say, because these are things I've heard. And so now I've got practice. I'm going in and once again, I'm bringing up the movie 8 Mile, and just like those battle rappers. I'm actually really impressed by battle rappers, by the way. They just like the real life ones. They always, it's like they're making it up on the spot, but they're not. And in the same way, we could have things that are lined up and ready to go, where we have a response that is ready, even, and you're putting it together for this individual. But what it comes is, you have, once you've been through this multiple times, hopefully you've got stuff stored up and you're ready for that. And so you got a quick rebuttal and something that is going to be effective. And so I would absolutely encourage you to role play for the cold calling or for the leads calling as well.
And I'd say even, a lot of times you get the training, with your upline, or you go through, your Medicare 101 and how to present the summary of benefits. But if that's the only training that you're getting, it's not enough. That's just the truth. Again, going back to sports, right? If you're only going to practice 3 times a week, you're not going to get better. You need to be putting in that extra work. And so when we talk about doing some role playing and getting with, friends and family, so you can present to them, these are things you want to do on your own time. We talk about, school, right? Our kids, they go to school, but they've also got that homework. They have to do some learning on their end as well. If the only learning that our kids are doing is in the school, it's not enough. There's a lot of learning that's going to take place outside of the school as well. So apply that same thing to your Medicare business and get out there and put in, on your own time, get that self-study and the donut hole. Right? Explaining the donut hole, understanding the donut hole is a challenge when you first get started. And then good luck trying to explain that thing. It can be a little bit difficult. So get on YouTube, find a video of the donut hole explained and practice that, and then get in front of somebody and explain the donut hole to them. Because the truth, we all know that we have to explain the donut hole when we're meeting with people and we're doing a presentation. So you want to be confident when it's time to deliver that presentation to your members. Yep.
So next one is, we got to change our relationship with the word no. And that's a big one, man. Like we've talked about this before, and so we won't spend too much time, but really just having it, I'm okay with hearing the word no. For some reason, it just kind of feels ugly inside, right? And you've talked about how you feel about it, and I coached you through it in the past. And the reason I was able to coach you through that is because I've also had to overcome it. And so I'm talking to you all from the position that I've already been through that. I'm not saying that I've not gone through it. And honestly, sometimes if I'm not like ready for it, it still hurts my feelings when I make the ask and I hear the no, but I'm like, oh yeah, remind myself, you know what? That's just part of the business. It's just part of what I do, because I'm going to hear those no's. But once I get through 8 or 9 no's, hopefully it's not that many, but once I get through them, I'm going to get to that yes. And it's just part of the process, understanding that hearing that word no is part of it. So just making yourself okay with it.
Sometimes it's just a no, right? You get the no and that's it. They just don't want to make that change. But then other times when you get the no, there may be a lesson in there. And so when we had Ernest on, he talked about that, right? And he says, okay, what did I, he gets back in the car and he says, what could I have done different? Did I miss something? Did I not ask the right questions? Did I overload them with too much information where they got confused? You really want to do kind of an analysis of the appointment and maybe try to figure out what you could have improved, where it went wrong, and also take away the things that you did right, and then kind of give yourself a grade there. And if it's a good grade, like I said, sometimes it's just a no that you're maybe they're on the plan that is the best option for them. But other times it's like, okay, let's find a lesson in this. And so it's reframing it, right? When somebody tells you no, and just turning it into a lesson, turning it into something positive.
Yeah. And a big part of that is having a short memory when it comes to it. So it's like kind of this idea where you throw out the negative parts, which are the rejection and everything like that, and then you keep the lesson learned. Mm-hmm. And so that's how we truly can change our relationship with that word. So did I get the lessons out of it? Like some people, there's reasons they say no. One of them is they're just kind of turned off to anyone trying to sell them. I'm okay with that. That one's not going to hurt my feelings, right? Like, especially like there's someone like no matter what you tell them, they're going to say no. Remember, like we saw someone the other day, and they just had an attitude where they didn't want to. It's almost like they were bothered by right. You being there. It can't hurt your feelings if they tell you no. They're telling everyone no. They're mad at everyone. So on to the next. And then other people who might say no. Maybe they just don't have enough information. And so I'm trying to give you enough information to know that you're not in the right position, and it's up to you, like if you want to receive that information or not. I can move on past that. So, and then sometimes it's just not the right time. And so you just got to be okay with that. Okay, on to the next. Let's do it. So the next one would be setting small goals instead of just looking for the sale. And what I mean is, instead of saying, okay, I need to get a sale here, is like, am I helping them? Am I guiding them? That's my goal. Is instead, I'm not looking for the sale. I'm looking to help this individual. And so my goal in this meeting is not to close necessarily, but instead my goal is to help meet their needs, help find solutions for them that could ultimately lead to those sales, right?
Yeah. I think a big part of when you're in the home or when you're talking to somebody, it's you're trying to gain some trust. And so I think it's doing a good job of educating them and making sure that they understand all the information that you're wanting to share with them is super important, because you're this is you pouring the foundation so that you can earn their trust and hopefully, earn their business and get that yes. But those are the goals that you want to set when you show up to these appointments is, okay, I'm going to get there and I'm going to make sure that I do a good job of educating them. I'm going to make sure that I do a good job of making sure that they understand. Because even me, when I present to people, I have checkpoints throughout my appointment. I'm going to stop here. Is everything making sense so far? Do you have any questions about anything? This is your presentation. I want to make sure that you understand all the information that I'm giving to you, because if you don't, we can go back over it again. I want to make sure that you really understand this, and you don't understand how much weight that carries when you're in the appointment, because it's a genuine, well, I'm being genuine when I say it, right? It's a part of my process, and it's going to earn their trust. But I think it's super important to set those small goals rather than saying, I'm going to walk in here and walk away with the sale. Obviously, we all know that's the goal. But let's set some goals within there.
Yeah, absolutely. What is the next one? Number 5 is visualize success. So another old movie from around 2000.
8 Mile.
No, Gladiator. So the movie Gladiator is a movie that comes to mind, and I always think about it because it had, there's certain things that are indelibly marked in your head, and that there's a part where he says, in a week I will be sitting with my family, and I'll be with my children, and they're about to go to war. And he tells them, this is where I'm going to be. And he tells everyone else, for you all, visualize where you will be. And that is going to be, or he says, it'll be so. That's where you're going to be. And so when I think about that and overcoming fears, I am looking at those fears as something that I'm going to overcome, even if I haven't yet. And I'm going to say, look, here's where I'm going to be. I'm kind of visualizing myself. Look, at some point, I am going to be, I'm going to have 1,000 clients in my book of business. And I am going to be in that position that Raul said he's in, where he's no longer afraid of the word no. And that's where I'm visualizing myself. And then I'm going to do everything I can to get to that space by putting the rest of these things into practice. That's going to be how I overcome it. So.
Yeah, and that's I like what you said there, right? If my goal is to have 1,000 members, let's figure that out. But if you're listening and you're a little bit newer, you're like 1,000, that's a lot. I'm still trying to get to my first 10 or my first 100. Then okay, let's get to 100. And then from there, let's double that to 200, and then let's get it to 500. Let's build that to 1,000. But whatever that goal may be, visualize it, like you said. But then make sure that you have the roadmap to go with it, right? Don't just visualize it and say, okay, I hope this really works out. I want to have 1,000 clients. Like, okay, if your goal is 1,000, then create a plan and write it out. Set some checkpoints, set some tiers, and say, okay, I got to get to the first 100. How am I going to get to the first 100? Here we are, clean slate. AEP is over. You may or may not have had the AEP that you were hoping for, but here we are in January. Okay, my goal is before AEP to put 150, 200 clients on the books. How are you going to do that? That's how many. I need 10 per month. I need 12 per month in order to get to this number. Okay, put that together. How many do I need each week? Okay, let's create some activity, whether it's leads, whether it's going out and creating relationships with providers, whether you're going to go put some events together to get in front of seniors. You've got to have the roadmap. You have to have something there with it, the blueprint, and create it. Don't just state a goal and hope that you get there.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. Number 6 is seek feedback. Oscar, where do you get your feedback?
Usually it's from you nowadays.
Yeah. For 10 years,
yeah,
right?
Well, actually, for 10 years. But also, I think a lot of the times I would ask you, I'd come to you and I'd say, hey, look, this is what I'm dealing with. What are your thoughts? Or this is what I went through, anything that, or even when I first started, when you'd ride along, I was like, all right, we get in the car. It's like, okay, what did I do? What did I do wrong? What could I have done better? What did I do right? I want the good and the bad.
Yeah.
And you got to learn how to take that feedback.
Yeah, I think that's a big part that you just said. You got to learn how to take the feedback. And there's people nowadays that are so sensitive when they hear any kind of feedback, and they immediately start to kind of puff up and like, hey, well, hold on. I think I did a pretty good job. But the reality is that if we're still not at our goal, then we should all, even if you are at your goal, you should be open to feedback, and you should seek that feedback and go out. And what I'm talking about is at the end of those role plays, first of all, you're doing it to help yourself, right? But you could ask them, hey, how did I do? Like, and because people are so sensitive nowadays, you have to let them know, like, hey, by the way, I understand that people are sensitive right now, but give me the good, bad, and ugly, right? Just tell me what I did well, but then hit me with what I could have done better. I want to know what I could have done better, and it's going to help you because there's a lot of people now. Everybody's different, and so you want to take people's feedback. People know how they don't want to feel in an appointment, even if they're not in sales. And so you could be talking to somebody, and if you're making them feel a certain way in that appointment, they're going to tell you, even if it's not advisable. And what I mean is, like, people don't want to feel pressure in a sale. Sometimes it's okay to put small amounts of pressure, on people. In Medicare sales in particular, we've got to be cautious with how we do that. But it's okay to give pushback or feedback. Sometimes people are going to give you feedback that says that hey, I felt like you came on a little strong, and so you can evaluate that feedback, but you should always be open to it.
I think seeking it in the right place is another important part, right? Baseball, again, I'm always using examples of baseball. If I'm trying to get better, because baseball is a game of failure, right? But if I'm trying to get better when I come up to bat every time, I'm not going to go seek some feedback from the guy who strikes out every time he goes up to bat. The person that I'm going to go seek some feedback from is the guy who always finds a way to get a hit, who's hitting those home runs, who always finds a way to get on base. I want to learn from that guy. I want some feedback from him. I don't want the feedback from the guy who's striking out all the time. So also make sure that wherever it is that you're going for the feedback, it's a good place that you're going to for it.
Yeah, and if you're an agent out there and you're listening, somebody asks you for feedback, don't just tell them I'm just really good, or I just say like give them some actual how are you doing it. So that's kind of another little side note here is that if somebody's coming to you, do the best that you can. What's like we do this podcast. There's a lot of agents and agencies out there that are benefiting from it, and sometimes you can just help people for no reason. So side note, I would recommend it. Who else do you go to for that feedback? Your upline. You can ask them, hey, what am I doing? I'm not able to. I'm not closing here, and it's contributing to the fears that I have of making making these calls to my leads because I'm not closing. And sometimes I'm like, man, if I'm not gonna close, then what's the point of even calling? I don't want to waste the leads until I get this part figured out. That's where a lot of people are. So what I would encourage, and every day that you go that you don't call the lead, it's getting colder and colder. Someone else is going to call it. So talk to your upline, talk to friends, even some of the different carriers. If they have managers, you could figure out, hey, where am I struggling? And then once you do, you can get over those fears and really move on from them. Number 7, the last one, would be kind of like mindfulness and relaxation. I've been learning a lot more about this lately. There's a lot of breathing techniques that you can look up. And what I'm talking about is right before you start cold calling, if you're nervous, one thing that we'll start to notice is that at least for me it did, is that
Same.
your heart rate starts to go up, and your breathing, you start to breathe a lot more shallow, and just kind of like, when you're nervous, it's harder to get the words out, and then it makes you talk softer. So all of these things have an impact. So what I would do is I'm going to stop. I'm going to take some deep breath. So there's a lot of different breathing techniques out there. The one that I do is it's 6, 9, and 12. And so you breathe in for 6 seconds, and then you hold it for 9. And then you release it through your mouth for 12 seconds. So just something that I've learned, and it's really helpful. What it does is it slows down your breathing. It just kind of takes my mind off of the anxiety. And so what I'm doing is I'm just kind of like watching in my head, kind of making up and visualizing the air going in, holding it. And that's what I'm thinking about, and just kind of take my mind off of how nervous I might be. And this is about anything. If you get nervous about stuff, it really does help. As far as other mindfulness tips and tricks, there's a lot of them out there. I would recommend doing that. Find some spirituality. There's lots of ways to figure this component out, and it's something that we highly recommend. I think that when you can find your way to calm that anxiety that you get, it's going to help. And so breathing is a big part of that for me.
Yeah, I like it, in the sense of, you're going to start dialing, you're going to go knock on some doors to build relationships. Also, in addition to that, I think when you get that no, because it's going to happen, just flush it. Just move on to the next one, and we're looking for that yes. So just stay positive, right? Be optimistic. I know it's easier said than done, guys, but you have to, right? It's a numbers game, and you just got to keep coming up to bat, and you got to keep swinging the bat. That's the only way you're going to get on base.
Yeah. At the end, right before I make that call, I'm going to say to myself, I'm not afraid of hearing the word no. And I'm gonna make that phone call. So, hey, do you have any other last notes before we wrap up?
I don't. No, I mean, we probably could have had a much longer episode here, but no, I think this was great.
Yeah, and do us a favor if there's something else you'd like us to talk about. Oh, one other thing, seeking feedback. If you ever have a question that you want us to answer, reach out to us. We had someone on a couple weeks ago. What we may do is have one day where we have a call-in show. So depending on how many people are reaching out, we're getting more and more people. So don't hesitate if there's something that you've been struggling with and something that you want us to talk to you about. Don't hesitate to reach out to us. We're on YouTube, on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. So until next time, thanks so much.